This is Brandon Helwig. I'm the publisher of UCFsports.com. And today I'm joined by Casey Porter of OState Daily. We're going to talk about this Saturday space game between the UCF Citronauts and the number 15 Oklahoma State Cowboys. Welcome, Casey.
Hey, thanks a lot, man. Appreciate you bringing me in. I'm super excited to talk about UCF, first of all, for the first time ever as a Big 12 member, as Oklahoma State plays them. I know, they played, I believe, in a Stetson Regional in baseball a couple of years ago. I can't remember, I'm 50 years old. I grew up in Stillwater. I've gone to every home game, I think, since I was born there in Stillwater. I can't ever remember OSU playing UCF, so this is exciting.
No, not in football. This will be the very first football game. I know the two schools played last year in basketball. I think it was in the Bahamas, or it was one of those places down there in UCF.
If I remember correctly, OSU got a big lead. UCF came back and won at the end, right?
Yeah, it was either overtime or something like that. But looking forward to this match. Now I just introduced this. It's going to be the UCF Citronauts. Now, do you know anything about this? It's the space game. Have you, over in Stillwater area, do you know anything about UCF space game tradition?
No, not one single thing. Citronaut sounds like, maybe the fruit and then kind of combined with some space stuff.
Yeah, well, that's kind of what it is. It's something that UCF started a few years ago. I think 2017 was the first space game, and then 2018 onward, they've had like a special uniform. They bring out this special color they call Canaveral blue, which is really just like Carolina blue, but they call it Canaveral blue. And UCF's going to wear all blue uniforms this Saturday. If any Oklahoma State fans watching on Saturday thinking like, who is this team we're playing? It looks like North Carolina. That'll be the reason why. But
very nice.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit. We can talk about both teams this season. I'll start by asking you, going into it. I just remember, obviously UCF's first year in the Big 12, and I'm excited to, learn about all these Big 12 teams. And I just remember, was it mid-September? I'm looking at scores and I'm seeing Oklahoma State is getting blasted by South Alabama. And I'm wondering what the heck's going on. And I think there was a loss to Iowa State the next week. And I remember there was something on Message Board Geniuses. And I knew you're probably familiar with those guys on Twitter. They shared something, and a lot of guys were freaking out. They're saying Mike Gundy's out of touch. He's lost control. There's going to be a lot of guys are going to be hitting the portal after 4 games. I mean, everyone was predicting like Oklahoma State may not have a team by November. Now they're the odds-on favorite to make the Big 12 championship game. Ollie Gordon now is a legitimate Heisman contender. Casey, just tell me what's changed for Oklahoma State these last couple months.
Well, first of all, they didn't settle in on a quarterback. The first 3 games, they played 3 different guys. Gundy, who is the son of the head coach, Mike Gundy, Garrett Rangel, who finished last season as the starter, and then Alan Bowman. They would give each of the 3 guys a certain percentage of the game. And Alan Bowman actually was quoted, one of my guys I do a podcast with, quoted to him that, hey, whenever you are playing in a game and you're only going to get a certain amount of possessions, okay, you have to make plays, because if you don't make plays, then you're not going to be the starting quarterback. Whereas if you know that you're going to play 4 different quarters, and whether you make a play or not, it makes it easier to throw the ball away and punt the first quarter, which keeps you away from mistakes. First of all, so just settling in on a quarterback, Alan Bowman, who's very experienced, he started at Texas Tech. Matter of fact, Oklahoma State, I can remember it like yesterday, faced him in Stillwater while he was at Texas Tech as a true freshman, and he threw for like 360 some odd yards. Big time arm, big time decision maker, super leader. He's very, very positive. So the first thing that they did, they settled in on a quarterback. And then the next thing they did is that they actually changed their blocking scheme up front to a gap scheme. OSU's been a zone blocking team for as long as Mike Gundy's been there. I mean, Mike Gundy played quarterback at Oklahoma State in the 80s with Thurman Thomas. He played quarterback with Barry Sanders. And then a lot of people forget that in 1990, Mike Gundy's senior year at quarterback, Oklahoma State also had a running back, Gerald Hudson, who led the nation in rushing that year. The year after Barry Sanders, the year after Barry Sanders. Actually, I think that was 1989 to be exact. Okay, so they all ran zone scheme. Okay, so Mike Gundy loves running zone scheme, and he loves running the ball. So Oklahoma State transitioned in that off week, after the Iowa State game, they had their bye week. they transition more to a gap scheme. They start running counter, pulling the guard and tackle, the guard and the H-back, guard and tight end last week, and they started blocking down, kicking out, and it's made all the difference in the world. The offensive line coach for Oklahoma State, Charlie Dickey, came to Oklahoma State from Kansas State. He was the offensive line coach for Bill Snyder there at Manhattan, and that's the type of blocking scheme they ran at K-State for all those years, where they had such great running games with Colin Klein and all the great running backs they've had. So it suits the offensive line coach very, very well, Charlie Dickey. I think it suits the offensive lineman very well because it gives them better angles. And most importantly, it's the type of back that Ollie Gordon is. Ollie Gordon's the type of guy, if you get that zone scheme, you give him a three-way go, you can bend it, bust it, or bounce it. That's a little bit too much for him to digest because he's always wanting to make the big play. And sometimes he likes to dance too much trying to make that big play. Whereas a gap scheme type blocking scheme gives him basically two options. You either hit the hole or you cut it back. And he's been really great at doing both. And he's been really great at letting the blocks develop in front of him. So that has been all the difference in the world as far as the rushing game goes. And if you know anything about Mike Gundy and Mike Gundy's offenses, we've had some years to where we've had an NFL quarterback and, Biletnikoff award-winning receivers to where we could just throw the ball every down. But that's rare. Most of the time, Mike Gundy offenses, they predicate everything they do. Believe it or not, I know this isn't perception, on rushing the football. Really? So when Mike Gundy's offenses are able to rush the football, that's when they're at their best, and that's been the biggest difference.
Gotcha. And Kansas State was the first game, right, after the bye week?
Yeah.
And that's where the offensive line coach came from?
They all run together. I can't remember if the bye week was before Iowa State or they all run together, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Yeah. So
the K-State was the first game. Oklahoma State really, really, really looked good. Let's put it to you that way.
Yeah. 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 Well, tell me more about Ollie Gordon, because, obviously we've got 6 consecutive 100+ yard games. He's had a couple 200-yard plus games here the last few weeks. He's definitely right up there now as a Heisman contender. Did we see this coming? Like, did you see this coming? Has this shocked people, or where did he kind of come from?
Not Oklahoma State fans. I think Oklahoma State fans are, more than anything, we're kind of just scratching their head. If you go back to even our early podcast on OState Daily, it was like, well, the clear best running back's Ollie Gordon. This guy's a stud. So no, I don't think it surprises any Oklahoma State fan that Ollie Gordon is this good. Now, obviously, the production, he went back-to-back weeks where he had over 250 yards. That's the first time an Oklahoma State back has done that in back-to-back weeks since Barry Sanders. So, I mean, obviously, when you're having that kind of production, that surprises, everybody, because when you talk about, we were going over the running backs Oklahoma State's had 8 running backs since about 2009 that have all made the NFL. I won't go over all their names. So you're talking about some big time running backs. And then that doesn't even include, the guys like Tatum Bell and David Thompson, all the guys that gap before Mike Gundy and all the way back to Barry Sanders. So you're talking 15, 16 running backs at Oklahoma State that have played in the NFL since Barry Sanders. And to be the first back that's gone over 250 back-to-back games like that, obviously that's very impressive. But no, Ollie Gordon has the total package. He has great vision. He's just a wonderfully positive young man. I think one of the biggest reasons why Oklahoma State's been able to turn this around is their best players are positive thinkers. They're guys that think, instead of, hey, this is terrible, they're guys that think, hey, we're better than this. How do we need to figure it out? I think the best comment Mike Gundy's ever made, he's walked into his coach's office, right after the South Alabama game, and he said, hey, raise your hand if you think that you can change the outcome of the South Alabama game. And none of the coaches obviously raised their hand. He said, okay, since we've established the fact that nobody can change what happened Saturday, I don't want to talk about it again. What we're going to talk about now is, what can we do to get better in the future? The coaches got together. They all put their brains together, put their ideas together. They came up with just a wonderful plan, and it has been fantastic since then. And I think, like I said, Mike Gundy's a positive thinker from a leader perspective. I think Alan Bowman's one of the most positive human beings you'll ever meet. So I think Oklahoma State has built around Alan Bowman and Ollie Gordon and the way that they positively think moving forward.
So coming off a 27-24 win against rival Oklahoma
Mhm.
and Bedlam, we think it's the final one, at least for the time being. Just what does that mean to Oklahoma State? I know it's been mostly a one-sided rivalry for the last 100 years or so, but to win the last one, especially with all the emotion and to do it at home, and I think everyone's seen the highlights if they didn't watch it live. Fans storming the field, the goalpost somehow ends up outside the stadium in a pond. Just tell us what that victory means to Oklahoma State.
That's not just a pond, by the way. That's Theta Pond, right?
Okay. Okay.
That's a famous pond. I just kid you because that's a famous pond on campus, and it's one of the first places everybody goes when they come to campus, and it's right there by all the fraternities and sororities. But hey, it's 5:15 Central Time. It would probably take me about 24 hours to describe to Oklahoma State fans what that means to beat OU. I'm 50 years old. I can tell you, 1976 was the first time they beat them. In my lifetime, I was 3 years old. Terry Miller, I've seen the videos of him going down the near boundary against OU and scoring. I don't remember seeing that. The next time Oklahoma State beat OU was 1995. Okay, so basically for a guy that was born in 1973, for me, like me, I was 22 years old before I ever saw Oklahoma State beat OU. Now, in between that time, OSU took, I believe, a 20-3 lead going into the fourth quarter against Oklahoma. I believe it was 1983, 1984. Both teams were ranked in the top 5. The winner was probably going to go to the Orange Bowl and play for national title. Okay. And OU actually, they had an onside kick to where the kicker was the only one that knew it was supposed to be an onside kick. It hits Chris Rockins on the helmet. OU gets the ball. They go win that game. 1988, Mike Gundy, who was the quarterback at the time, Barry Sanders is on that team. He throws a ball in the end zone to Brent Parker. He's wide open, and he just drops the ball. Literally, that was the last play of the game. And so there was nothing but heartache for people that were of my age. Then Oklahoma State broke through in 95 with Bob Simmons. They broke through again in 97. And then they also beat OU in 2001 in a 4-7 season when OU was actually ranked number 2 and getting ready to play for the national title. And then when Mike Gundy got here, it's been close game after close game after close game. Finally broke through in 2011 whenever Oklahoma State won the Big 12 title. Should have played to the national title. It was still back when there was only 2 teams that got in. They chose LSU instead. I think we know the bias there. Oklahoma State definitely was the second best team in the country that year. Got beat by Iowa State on a tough field goal call that a lot of Oklahoma State fans still think was good. Okay, and then 2013 had a reverse call and an interception that Justin Gilbert had. That was, I don't think, a call that was correct as far as the reversal goes. Had another one where you had an interception in the end zone with the Baker Mayfield teams. So there's just been, the point being is there's just been heartbreak after heartbreak after heartbreak. So to see, not just this game, but Oklahoma State also beat OU the last time we were in Boone Pickens. So they've beaten Oklahoma for the first time ever in back-to-back home games and won the last 2 out of 3, and the last one, it couldn't feel any sweeter.
And so when I've been, asking some of these people week to week that I've talked to, upcoming opponents for UCF, I ask about the atmospheres in the Big 12 and who's at the top of the list. Kansas State gets mentioned, but the one you hear that's first and foremost, and even the people at Kansas State, when I asked people in the press box, they said it's Oklahoma State. It's by far the best atmosphere in the Big 12. Would you concur? I'm sure you're a little biased, but I feel like you will concur with that statement. And what is it? What is it about, Boone Pickens Stadium that makes it such a great home field advantage? And unfortunately for UCF, they won't get to experience that until now 2026 with the Big 12 scheduling matrix came out last week. Unfortunately, it'll be a few more years before UCF can experience what game day in Stillwater is like.
I have been to every venue in the Big 12, the old Big 12, and that includes Texas, Texas A&M, Missouri, Nebraska, all the original Big 12 teams. I've been to all their venues. I have not been to Houston, obviously, haven't been to UCF, right. Haven't been to Cincinnati, haven't been to the new guys, haven't been to BYU. Although I know people who have. That's probably the coolest environment,
yes.
Up against the mountains there. But what makes Boone Pickens so amazing, first of all, is that the historic Gallagher-Iba Arena butts up to it to the east. It actually runs east and west. Most football fields run north and south. So it actually runs east and west. On the east end is the historic Gallagher-Iba Arena, who that arena time after time after time has been ranked as one of the top 5, top 10 arenas in the United States of America. When Oklahoma State's good in basketball, it is just an amazing place to play. So that's the first thing, is it has a really cool historic basketball arena butted up against it. And then the other thing that it is that it's the absolute perfect size for what Oklahoma State needed. They didn't build it at 75,000 people. They didn't build it at 65. It's a little over 50,000, which means it's totally full every time, Oklahoma State plays. And so the totally full thing is makes it a great atmosphere. Then it's an entire horseshoe going around all the way back around the west side. And then they didn't mess with the dimensions as far as how close, it used to have a track around it whenever, way back in the 60s. They eliminated that. And so when you go to Oklahoma State, literally the sideline to the first row of stands is like 15 feet. I mean, like, you go catch a pass and you slam up against the pads there on the wall, that's the retaining wall that's holding the stands in place. So the fans are literally just right up on top of you. I mean, if you're a coach, you can hear every word they're saying. Then the student fan base, they have a group of people called the paddle people, and there's about 30 of them, and they all have paddles, and they slam those paddles.
Yeah, I see that on TV. They're banging the wall nonstop the entire game
against the mats, and it's really cool. And then obviously the game day people, they have the unbelievable, pyrotechnics with the fireworks. You have Bullet, the horse that comes out. And so just and then, I've been to every stadium. I have walked around Boone Pickens probably 100 times in my life. I've yet to find one thing that I can complain about. It is, just from the lampshades to the bathrooms, just to the rest of the concession stand. I mean, everything was put together perfectly when Boone Pickens donated that money for Oklahoma State to build that stadium, and they just did it absolutely perfect.
Yeah. So what kind of were the improvements made fairly recently? Has the stadium undergone a huge transformation in the last 10 or 15 years?
No, it was way back, even Les Miles, I believe the last year of Les Miles.
It's been like 20 plus years.
Yes, correct.
Probably.
Now they had to redo some stands areas, I believe on the north side this last year, but that was more like a maintenance deal. And, for the casual fan like me, of course, I walk around the whole bowl every game. I like to take in every angle and every view. You don't really notice that. That's more just of a maintenance deal. But yeah, they built the south side, I believe, first when Les Miles was there, and then they built the north side. And so that west side you could see under construction for like a year and a half. Then they finally got it done, and man, it's been awesome ever since.
Yeah, well, I guess what's kind of the Oklahoma State view of the future of the Big 12? Obviously, the 4 newcomers this year, losing Texas and OU. Obviously, no more Bedlam, but then you bring in the Pac schools for next season. It'll be a 16-team league. We just got our schedules for the next few years coming up. I heard, listen to Gundy's press conference on Monday, and he was saying it's going to kind of be like the NFL. You're going to have a lot of, 6-6 and 7-5 type teams. Everyone's going to beat up on each other. It'll be rare to have, 10-win teams going forward. So you kind of lose the rival, but I mean, for Oklahoma State, maybe as you see maybe more opportunity to emerge as maybe one of the flagship schools of the new Big 12. What's kind of the O-State fan view of all these changes?
I can only speak for myself, but I think I have a pretty good view of the vibe. OU and Texas have held this Big 12 conference hostage for so many years. They whenever they left, I'm sure they thought that everybody else would crumble. And, even you hear OU fans nowadays, call it a JV conference and that kind of stuff. I think it really bothers OU fans, the fact that Oklahoma State, K-State, Texas Tech, Baylor, all these schools, hey, we rebounded. We went and got 4 schools that brought us back to 12, and then we got a great media contract, and we moved right on without OU and Texas. Now, that put us in the position to be a stronger conference than what the Pac-12 was. You absorbed the 4 schools from the Pac-12 after USC and UCLA went to the Big Ten. So, hey, in my opinion, it's a perfect case scenario for OSU because you get out from underneath that shadow of OU, which is a dark shadow. OU has just been a phenomenal program. There's been so many, if OSU could have just, there's been so many times just in the last 10 years that the Big 12 title literally went through the OSU-OU game, the Bedlam game, and OU won it most of the time, right? So OU's been just a dark shadow for Oklahoma State. So from the OSU perspective, getting out from underneath their shadow while also landing in a position of a power conference, hey, this Big 12 conference, no doubt about it, is going to be a power conference. It's not going away. It is going to have tremendous access to the playoffs. The schools in it are going to be making, hey, Oklahoma State, there's only a certain amount of money Oklahoma State needs to recruit, right? I mean, you're going to Dallas, you're going to Houston, you're going to Trophy Club, Texas. I mean, you're probably not going to California very often. So the schools are going to have plenty of money for what they need to do to be relevant and to be competitive. They're going to have great access to the playoffs, and they're going to have a great conference full of teams that are all in the same boat, that want to be in this conference, they all have similarities. Hey, they're all kind of the same size of school. They're all kind of that same type of brand. And from that perspective, what Mike Gundy means is everybody's going to kind of be the same. And so every week, every single game is going to come down to the last possession. And because of that, you're going to have different time zones from basically 10 o'clock in the morning all the way till midnight. You're going to have one possession games after one possession games after one possession games. And it's going to be wildly entertaining for the entire country to watch.
Does Oklahoma State, is there going to be a rival in the new Big 12?
That's the one downfall. I doubt there is going to be a rival. What Oklahoma State and a school like that has to do is they have to make the rival whoever the second place team is that's trying to beat them and keep them out of the Big 12 title game. That's who the rival needs to become, because that means Oklahoma State has ascended themselves to the top of the conference. I think your natural rival would be somebody maybe like a Texas Tech, maybe a K-State. But I think the rivalry here, I think the rivalry here is trying to become first place. What place you're in, that's the rivalry.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit more about the offense. I know you touched on Alan Bowman coming over from Texas Tech, a tremendous decision maker. He won the job. I've talked about Ollie
in between Tech and OSU. Yeah.
Okay. So he's I'm pulling up his bio right now. So he's been a lot of different places. We talked a little bit about him. We talked about Ollie Gordon. Who are some of the other players offensively to watch for Oklahoma State? Who are maybe, is the offensive line solid? Receivers, you talked about, maybe everything going through the running game, but who are some of the other players to watch offensively?
I think the Oklahoma State center, Joe Michalski. I don't watch other teams, so I can't, compare him to other teams and say, hey, he's better than this guy or that guy. Joe Michalski is fantastic. He's a guy that is powerful enough to block a nose tackle. He's smart enough to double a nose tackle, scrape a linebacker, and then athletic enough actually to get that done. He is fantastic. Rashad Owens had 10 catches. He was beast mode against OU. He's that, kind of hybrid type guy where he has tight end type size and he has wide receiver type athletic ability. So, hey, they kind of maybe throw him a little hitch like a tight end to move the chains or on a first down to get ahead of the chains. Then you can also take him out at wide receiver and just throw him a fade pass and let him beat a corner. So he's a bad matchup for other teams. Rashad Owens is fantastic. Oklahoma State's down through their three top receivers with Blaine Green, Talon Shetron, and Jaden Bray. So they're actually down three of their top receivers right now. Leon Johnson Jr. actually came over from George Fox, a Division III university, actually had to give up his red shirt. He's a senior. He transferred last year, and he's been fantastic. But the biggest, playmaker receiver OSU has is Brendan Presley. This guy's electric with the ball in his hands. He's the guy that you'll see him and go in motion a million different times. He's a guy that OSU tries to play Where's Waldo with him, and they'll throw him a million different types. They'll throw him a quick, a bubble, then they'll throw him a hitch. They run all their mesh routes with Brendan Presley. He is a really, really big weapon. So, Alan Bowman has some guys to choose from. And then I think the running backs that back up Ollie Gordon are good too. Jaden Nixon's a good back, kind of a good compliment to his size. Nixon's a smaller scat back guy. And then Elijah Collins is kind of the mix between Gordon and Jaden Nixon. So Leon Johnson Jr. is a good receiver. Brendan Presley, I think, is the playmaker. Rashad Owens is the guy that's the terrible matchup for the other team. And I think Joe Michalski on the offensive line is the guy to watch.
And looking at the other side of the ball, tell me, who is defensive coordinator Brian Nardo? Because it's always interesting that when you go and you're looking to hire a coordinator. He came from a Division II school, yes, Gannon University. Yep. Probably no one knew who he was. Most fans probably had no idea who he was when he was hired. So tell me a little bit about him and how because Coach Gundy got connected with him and what kind of defensive coordinator has he been this season?
Well, this is not something that Oklahoma State is not familiar with. He went and got a offensive coordinator, a few years back, who I believe is at Ohio State right now, from Shippensburg. and his
Okay.
name
So
was
this
Mike
is
Pearson.
nothing new for Mike Gundy,
Yes,
finding
no.
coordinators at a lower level.
Mike Gundy definitely believes that if you can coach, you can coach. Brian Nardo, obviously coming from Gannon, he came to Oklahoma State. What Mike Gundy has always liked is that odd stack defense, that 3-3-5, because he just thinks the spacing makes it, just kind of is a puzzle for an offensive coordinator. At least for him throughout the years, it's been the hardest defense for him to defeat. He was the offense. He called the plays for OSU all the way up till about, I believe, about 2010. And so that odd stack, just thinking in his mind, has always been the most difficult defense for him to defeat. Iowa State ran it. They've always had some of the best defenses in the Big 12 with not necessarily the best players. So he definitely wanted to go get a 3-3-5 defensive coach. So that's the first thing I think he was looking for. He wanted to get a young, sharp guy that can solve problems. Brian Nardo, this guy's a savant, man. I love this guy. He is a guy that can absolutely think through problems. And I think the biggest probably issue with him is that he has to deal with is that he is so smart and he's so creative, kind of like a Lincoln Riley on the defensive side of the ball, that I think probably his biggest challenge is not trying to put too much in for the guys to where they actually can't operate because there's so much scheme in. He's done just a masterful job of getting just enough scheme in to where the guys can play fast, they can play physical, they can get to the football, and they can tackle. Now, I understand they do give up some yards, they give up some points, but my God, they played K-State, they played Kansas, they played a really good rushing team in Cincinnati, they played OU. So, yeah, no wonder they give up points because these are teams that are just fantastic on offense, So, hey, it's going to be a challenge this week against UCF and Plumlee and the Gus Malzahn read option offense with the pass game that's married off of it to that and all the running backs that UCF has and all the speed. But Brian Nardo, in my opinion, is a young superstar coach. OSU will be lucky to keep him for, much of a long period of time.
So who are some of the players to watch defensively? Who are some of the best players, or any NFL prospect that you're aware of, or who are some of the top guys on the OState defense?
I think if you're just looking at it from an NFL perspective, I think the number one NFL perspective guy at this point would probably be Xavier Benson, just because he's 6'2", he's rangy, he's multiple. That 3-3-5, what makes it great. That 4-2-5, which was in still kind of in fad, but was in fad for so long. You had that half player, half run, half pass player, but he was a half linebacker, half safety. So in this 3-3-5 defense, that half player is half linebacker, half defensive lineman. So the guy that you're going to see there is Colin Oliver, and Colin Oliver is the guy that can play linebacker on one play to make it a 3-3-5 look. Then he can come down and play a defensive end to give it a 4-man front. So Oklahoma State's able to be versatile that way because of Colin Oliver. I think he's probably the key that makes that go. And then middle linebacker Nick Martin. This guy has been a heat-seeking missile. He had 17 tackles in back-to-back weeks, Kansas and K-State. This guy, he's elite at coming in on blitz packages. And he's the guy also, when you're talking about Jason Bean at Kansas, you're talking about Dylan Gabriel at OU, you're talking about Will Howard at K-State. These are quarterbacks that can really, really, really run. So he's been the guy for the most part that has been that spy that Oklahoma State has played on the quarterback, and that has been just a huge factor for him.
So how do you think Oklahoma State is viewing this game against UCF? I mean, I know you're not part of the team, so maybe no one really knows that, but maybe how are the fans viewing this one? UCF they've been in most of these games in the Big 12, just haven't been able to finish, but the run defense has really been not good at UCF. And whether it was Kansas State or Kansas or West Virginia, even Cincinnati giving up, two different running backs ran for over 100 yards. And, UCF fans see Ollie Gordon coming to town on Saturday and are kind of wondering, what the end result will be. But, Vegas anyway thinks it's going to be a close game. UCF is trying to get some of that home field advantage back in the bounce house. So how are Oklahoma State fans viewing this game?
I think OSU fans are viewing this like UCF is schizophrenic. Like, hey, are we going to get the team that gets beat by a very average team by 31 points? Or are we going to get the team that had whatever it was on Baylor, a 30-point lead and was completely dominating Baylor? Are we going to get the first half UCF of that team? Or are you going to get the second half of that team? And, of course, RJ, I believe is his first name, Plumlee, your quarterback. Very good player, very fast, experienced guy, came from Ole Miss. So him getting back into the lineup, and not just getting back the lineup, but I think now you could say he's probably settled in and comfortable at this point. That's a huge factor for UCF. UCF is an outstanding offense. They're an outstanding rush offense. Anytime you have Gus Malzahn, Gus Malzahn was actually at the University of Tulsa here in Oklahoma for a while, right? I believe it was right after he coached high school. So we got very familiar here in Oklahoma with his read option scheme. Got to see it obviously at Auburn as well, his time at Arkansas too. Okay, so Gus Malzahn has elite run scheme when you're talking about quarterback play, read option game, multiple options in the run game as far as the quarterback keeping it, the quarterback giving it. Not nearly as sophisticated of a pass game, because most of the pass game is married to that run game, but the pass game is effective for Gus Malzahn because the run game is so good, and especially when he has a quarterback like Plumlee that has the speed, the versatility, the decision-making, and has, the experience. He's a two-sport star. So I always love those baseball players, because baseball players are always so calm under pressure. Baseball is such a game of failure that, they just learn to just, move to the next play. So, Plumlee is going to be a major threat to Oklahoma State Saturday. It worries me to no end.
So Oklahoma State fans are nervous about this game.
Oh, absolutely.
You look at
we're Oklahoma State. We're known for losing games like this. Right?
Okay, because I'd be kind of thinking that, you got UCF. I think it's Houston and then BYU. Is that the order? I think it is. And then if you're looking, that's a pretty manageable path to get to the Big 12 championship game.
You couldn't ask for anything more. That's not a slight to anybody, but we put ourselves in a good spot.
Yeah. So for Oklahoma State to be successful on Saturday, they need to do what?
It's very simple. They need to do exactly what they did to OU. They have to control the game on the offensive side of the ball for OSU. They have to slow the tempo down, and they have to rush the football, and they have to have the ball all day long. So Oklahoma State's best defense on Saturday, you're going to see them huddle. You're going to see them slow the game down. You're going to see them slow the tempo, and you're going to see them try to keep UCS offense off of the field while they were getting first downs and scoring on offense. Then what needs to happen, what Oklahoma State did to OU, OSU needs to get a lead, whether it be a 7-point lead. If UCF gets a 2-score lead on OSU and OSU has to speed it up, it might be a bad day for the Pokes. So OSU needs to get a lead. They're going to slow so they can continue to slow the game down from a pace perspective, continue to control the game by rushing the football. So that would be, what Oklahoma State has to do to win.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Mike Gundy, and just kind of watching his press conferences. Probably my first exposure to him was the, I'm a man, I'm 40 diatribe he had, which is very justified if anyone goes back and reads, why he was so upset. I enjoyed watching his press conference, 30 minutes of it on Monday. But obviously he's a former, OState quarterback.
And he's an Oklahoma boy.
He's an Oklahoma guy. What will his legacy be? That's still being written, obviously, but just. I think his first season was the only losing season. It's been a winning season. They've gone to a bowl and had a winning season every season since 2006. So what will Mike Gundy's legacy be at Oklahoma State, you think?
Well, it's always going to be Boone Pickens Stadium, but it's going to be at Mike Gundy Field. I don't think there's any doubt about that. The basketball arena is Eddie Sutton Court. Mike Gundy unequivocally is the best coach Oklahoma State has ever had. He's going to be the best coach Oklahoma State will have ever had. I don't see anybody ever surpassing him. When you go all the way back to his playing days that started back in 1986, he's been at Oklahoma State for however many years that is, almost 40 years at one school. He is Oklahoma State, period, in a discussion. That's why they gave him the rolling contract to where, it just automatically rolls over every year. That's why I believe he is the highest paid coach in the Big 12. That's why I believe he takes the highest percentage of any athletic budget as far as a coach does with their salary. He's worth every penny of it. And he gets it. He gets how important that win for Oklahoma State was against OU, and that makes it even cooler. So you can't say enough about what Mike Gundy's legacy is going to be at Oklahoma State. It's going to be just like Gary Ward was in baseball, but it's on the football side, just like Eddie Sutton's was on the basketball court, but it's football. So just put that on steroids because it's football. That's going to be Mike Gundy.
one of the last things, I know you have a baseball background. You did
Yeah.
a lot of coverage for the Los Angeles Dodgers minor league system, and you followed Big 12 baseball. So this is going to be an exciting year coming up for UCF. They've been in the American these last few years, and with RPI and whatnot, you had to either win the conference, honestly,
Yeah.
to have a chance to make the regionals. But that won't be the case in the Big 12. If you have a good team, I mean, there's probably going to be multiple obviously teams making the postseason. So everyone's excited about next season at UCF. They got a new head coach, Rich Wallace, a former UCF player.
Yeah.
I think they open up the season at OU, and the first home series will be actually against Oklahoma State. So as someone who's been following Big 12 baseball for quite a few years, just tell us a little bit about it, what kind of atmospheres UCF will be playing in, and what the outlook is, because next year you're bringing in two great programs in Arizona and Arizona State.
Yeah. And Utah's pretty good too. The
Yeah.
Dodgers have had a couple of Utah Utes in their system, mainly Andre Jackson, who actually is pitching in the major leagues for the Pittsburgh Pirates right now. The atmospheres are okay. I mean, the stadiums are okay. O'Brate Stadium, obviously, is fantastic, 60 million. Eldale Mitchell, I think if you go there, you'll be okay. Well, this is okay. I mean, it's nothing special. The TCU Lipton Stadium there, I mean, they are right on top of you. That's a pretty intimidating place to play. Baylor, they built their stadium around 2000, and there for about the first 6 or 7 years when they were really, really, really good, they actually led the nation in attendance for like 4 or 5 years in a row. And when Steve Smith had it going there at Baylor. So, hey, when Baylor's good, that's a really nice place to play and very hard place to play to win. I believe they did get rid of their coach last year, so they're going to be bringing in a new coaching staff. I have been to, Texas Tech there. That is a really, really difficult place to play just for the simple fact that the wind's always blowing. That place is always packed. That's a great atmosphere there. Jeff Haxton actually is a Stillwater boy who does the play-by-play there for Texas Tech baseball. He, the adios muchacho. I don't know if you ever heard that home run call for him, but that is just a fantastic place to play baseball. Plus it's turf. The wind's blowing out. It's going to be about 21-20. Texas Tech has that West Texas kick ass in them, if you will. So it's always like you're getting in a backyard fight with them every time you go. And so that's a really cool place to play. Texas is big and cavernous. I would not say it's intimidating whatsoever. It's just really big and kind of impressive looking. K-State and Kansas is not impressive at all. K-State's is, it gets what you would expect from K-State. I've been to Arizona's facility. That's a pretty cool place to play. But, I think the Big 12 environments are okay. I mean, they're nothing like SEC, like going to Duty Noble Stadium there in Mississippi, or anything like that. But I mean, they're okay. I think
Okay.
UCF's going to enjoy that. They're going to enjoy the baseball more, I think, than they are the environments, because all of those programs are really good.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun because, UCF's been playing, I think, 24 conference games for years,
Yeah.
and it's going to be 30 from now on. So it's no longer those 5 or 6 weeks of just kind of meaningless weekend series.
Yeah.
It's going to get started real quick. But, man, Casey, I appreciate it. I really enjoyed talking to you about Oklahoma State and learning about everything. And do you do score predictions? Have you thought that far ahead? I hate putting people on the spot if you haven't really thought about it. But
before we move on, hey,
yeah.
I wanted to give props to Alex Freeland, your former
former UCF baseball player.
Born with a club foot, got to cover him a whole lot. He was at the high A Great Lakes level. Great Lakes is the high A affiliate of the Dodgers, which is, so the way it works is you have the complex league, and then the affiliates start at single A, then you have high A, then double A and triple A. So after this year, if he starts in double A Tulsa, that means that he'll be 2 steps away from the major leagues. He is a guy that has a world of power, a world of athletic ability. Super, super impressed with the job that he is doing with the Dodgers minor league system. Haven't had a chance to catch up with him to interview him yet. Haven't been able to. I've interviewed most of the minor leaguers in the Dodgers system, not had a chance to run into him. I'm hoping whenever he makes it to Tulsa to run into him and get to talk to him, because him and his family are just wonderful people, and he is a tremendously talented baseball player.
Yeah, he was a 3rd-round draft pick, I think, by the Dodgers and everything. Yeah, I didn't even realize that he was born with a club foot. I guess there was a story written about it in The Athletic. I was Googling that right now as we were talking, so that's interesting. All right, man. Well, I appreciate it. Thanks for your time, Casey, and we'll see what happens on Saturday.
Okay, man. Hey, I appreciate you getting
Yeah.
a hold of me. Anytime that you need anything about Oklahoma State, just reach out.
Great stuff. Thanks a lot.